Rainbow Reflections, Book 1, A Kind of Magic. Chapter 9, Coming Soon. Hyaktu turned the rigid mirror shard over in his fingers, trying to inspect every centimeter of it. He was now alone in the art studio, his painting of a waterfall forgotten and his dinner cold. He looked up as the door opened again. Khurshid and Fern entered, shortly followed by Aster. "Why'd you call us all here?" Aster asked. "I was in the middle of dinner." "It's important," Hyaktu said. "Oh, is it your painting? How's it coming along?" Aster queried, bounding forward to take a look at it. Hyaktu rolled his eyes. "It's definitely not the painting. It seems one of our students was being watched by a spirit earlier." His words had an instant effect. Aster froze, Fern frowned, and Khurshid looked alarmed. "I want the security upped," Hyaktu went on. "The frog oils are going to be awake every day and night now, but I also want the grounds to be checked regularly for any objects." "Objects?" Fern asked, her frown growing deeper. Hyaktu nodded and showed them the mirror shard. "The spirit left this behind. We were lucky Sarala saw it. I don't know how a spirit could get past the enchantments, but I'm more interested in why. And why would it leave this mirror shard?" He shook his head and looked over at Fern and Aster. "Could you two make sure there aren't any other objects in the garden that Sarala might have overlooked?" Fern nodded and left, dragging Aster behind her. Hyaktu waited a moment for them to go, even though they had closed the door behind them. He then turned to Khurshid.
"You know more about that mirror shard, don't you?"
Khurshid asked. "Possibly," Hyaktu said, thinking back to his adventures before the school's creation. "But it's impossible to know for sure if I can't use my own magic on this mirror. It's protected quite heavily, which makes me wonder if it's the same spirit who dropped a shard before, or a different one. Last time, that spirit made no attempt to hide who was behind the dropped mirror shards. People would pick up a mirror shard and stare at their reflection, then get teleported to the big mirror that the shard belonged to. Last time, it was in a cave. This time, who knows?"
"Sarala was lucky not to have stared at it, then,"
Khurshid murmured. "Quite," Hyaktu agreed. "We cannot risk having more mirror shards turn up. I'll try to figure out where this came from and who it was meant to teleport, if it's the same spirit we're dealing with."
"Why would that spirit come here?"
Khurshid asked. "When we came across the spirit before, they were stealing people to make weapons for it," Hyaktu said.
"But none of the students, none of the teachers, know how to do that."
Hyaktu nodded. "Well, I'll just have to figure out what the spirit wants, and who it even is."
"If you need any help, just let me know,"
Khurshid told Hyaktu.
"You know I've got your back, even if I can't see it."
Hyaktu smiled up at his tall friend. "Thank you, Khurshid." Khurshid grunted and left the art studio as well. Hyaktu was now alone with the mirror shard, which he still held between his thumb and pointer finger. He raised it to eye level and inspected it, keeping his eyes darting about its edges. He couldn't allow his eyes to fall still, and they definitely could not look at his own reflection. If he was teleported out of the school, he couldn't think of that. He continued to turn it over in his fingers, trying to feel its magic. Closing his eyes, he reached out with his own magic, but knew it'd be no use. The shard was too heavily protected, disarming any magic that might be used against it. Hyaktu opened his eyes and frowned. The hair on the back of his neck was prickling, and a shiver went down his spine. He had the feeling that he was being watched. But as he scanned the room around him and checked the mirror shard again, he could see nothing. He closed his eyes and reached out with his energy once more, but he was still quite alone. "You're watching me from the other side of that mirror," he realized. "Well, I'm not going to give you anything to look at." Hyaktu stuffed the mirror shard in his robe pocket, refusing to allow the spirit to see what was going on. He then pulled out his personal mirror from his opposite pocket and held it up. He tapped his passcode in, 736996, then opened his contact list of 5 people. The family mirror for the kids, Jabali, Khurshid, Fern, and Aster. Selecting Jabali's name, he stared down at the still image of the man's face as he waited for the mirrors to connect. It luckily didn't take long.
Yo, Hyaktu!
Jabali's loud voice boomed from the mirror as he appeared in real time, his bushy hair tied back in a tail. Hey, Jabali, Hyaktu said. I'm not interrupting anything, am I? Jabali shook his head, setting his mirror down as he bustled around his kitchen island.
Just doing some cooking,
he called as he disappeared from the frame, stooping down to grab something.
You interrupted me more in the last call, you know?
Hyaktu snorted. That's true.
What's up?
Jabali asked, reappearing with a metal pot in his hands. What are you making? Hyaktu asked curiously. Jabali raised a thick eyebrow.
Seriously? You called me to ask me for my dinner plans?
No,
Gonna make me some spicy tomato potato soup?
Jabali declared.
Now why you bothering me?
Hyaktu rolled his eyes and sat on the floor, positioning himself more comfortably as he quickly told Jabali about the mirror shard. Jabali placed the pot on the counter and did not move again as he listened to Hyaktu.
You think it's the same spirit?
Jabali queried when he had finished. Hyaktu shrugged, shoving his bangs from his eyes. I'm not sure. I thought that spirit would have learned their lesson. Listen, do you think you can come by tonight to take a look at the enchantments? I don't know how a spirit could have gotten in.
Sure thing, but you better feed me good when I get there.
Jabali chuckled, reaching for the mirror.
See ya in an hour.
He hung up the call before Hyaktu could say anything. Shaking his head in amused exasperation, Hyaktu exited the art studio and headed for the eating hall to get food for Jabali, forgetting his own plate as he went. Within minutes, he had a bowl for his friend, asking the cooks to keep it in one of the warm ovens for the next hour. Hyaktu then went to the entrance hall, where he practiced martial arts while he waited. He did a few jumping kicks, using his air magic to propel him higher and allow him to land softly on the hardwood floor. Wanting to test his body connection, he assumed a low square stance and turned his waist as he scooped his arms in blocking motions. By the time Jabali showed up outside the glass doors, Hyaktu had moved on to doing a tiny section of a form, trying to get the body connection down. Jabali tapped on the door with his knuckles. Though it had been a light knock, the whole glass rattled like it was about to shatter. Wincing, Jabali stopped at once and smiled in at Hyaktu. Hyaktu rushed forward to unlock and open the door, then stepped out to join the tall man in the cool night air. Jabali stood at about 6 feet, and his broad-shouldered frame only made Hyaktu look even tinier in comparison. He was dressed in a pale green shirt and dark blue shorts. That was fast, Hyaktu commented. Jabali shrugged.
I can move really fast when I need to.
Oh, I know, Hyaktu said. Do you want to eat first, or check the enchantments?
I'll look first,
Jabali said.
Can't have any other spirits getting in, now can we?
Hyaktu shook his head in agreement. No, we can't. Thanks for coming so quickly, though. You really didn't have to do that. Jabali shrugged again and started walking around the stone building, heading for the southwestern tower to move clockwise around the school's perimeter. Hyaktu trailed after him quietly. Crickets chirped and plants groaned, setting a peaceful tone to the summer evening. The sun set beyond the clouds, the sky turning a deep blue within mere minutes.
So, the year started off fine apart from a potential spirit?
Jabali asked, staring up at the school the entire time as he walked. Yes, Hyaktu said. Zin has air magic, just like Ren and me.
Great, now y'all can blast me backwards,
Jabali huffed.
Why couldn't one of you be an earth magician, eh?
They turned the corner and walked along the perimeter of the western wall behind the greenhouse, their footsteps padding softly against the grass and dirt. I was concerned Zin wouldn't get her magic, actually, Hyaktu murmured, gazing at the trees opposite them. It took her trying all of the assessments, even fighting me. She didn't gain it until the very end, after I already pushed myself almost to my limits.
Do you think she actually got it, then?
Jabali grumbled. Hyaktu paused in his tracks with a frown. Why wouldn't she have it?
'Cause Ren could have made her have air magic if they both had the same magic,
Jabali pointed out, moving on around the Sihon family tower to the northern wall. Hyaktu hurried after him, nearly stumbling over his feet as he considered this. But my kids wouldn't do that, much less Ren. She wouldn't lie about something so serious, especially if it could hurt Zin. Jabali shrugged, still staring up at the building. Hyaktu looked up too, but none of the lights were on in the tower. His kids were likely asleep by now. Ren wouldn't lie, he repeated under his breath. He shook his head and ran after Jabali again, not realizing he'd been falling behind as he walked slowly. I suppose I can look into it a little more, but I'm sure Zin has her magic, he said as he walked alongside the broad man once more.
If you say so,
Jabali said, walking next to the eastern building now.
Anyway, I ain't seeing any holes in your enchantments. The school looks as safe as it always does. There's a nice big purple shield all the way around it. I mean, I can't see the top of the dome from out here, but there ain't any cracks or holes. And I'll check the top when we're in the courtyard.
Hyaktu frowned, slowing his pace again as they returned to the front of the school. That's so odd. Jabali gazed down at Hyaktu for a long moment, slowing his pace as well.
I'll check when we go in,
he repeated. Hyaktu nodded. Please do, and thank you.
You're lucky I can see spirit magic,
grumbled Jabali.
Wanna appoint me as your security guard yet?
Hyaktu snorted, flinging open the door to the entrance hall so rapidly that the glass shook. I already offered that to you years ago. It's not my fault if you were running too many businesses to come.
I just didn't want you having to tell your kids about me before you were ready,
he said as he entered. I appreciate that, Hyaktu murmured, locking the door with a quick click. This way. Jabali trailed Hyaktu through the empty entrance hall, eyeing the blank walls.
You really gotta add some decor in here, you know?
Well, this hall is tiny and nobody really comes through here, stated Hyaktu. Anyway, we're already here. He opened the door to the courtyard. The area was illuminated by curved lampposts. The metal lanterns glowed orange due to the fire magic within them. The pond reflected the shimmering light. Hyaktu wondered if it also mirrored the spirit magic shield around the school. He looked over to Jabali in question.
Yep, that shield'll sure be going strong,
Jabali said with a nod, staring up at the night sky.
Bright violet, almost as neon as your eyes.
Hyaktu nodded. That's a relief, he murmured, but that still doesn't answer how a spirit got in.
Maybe it wasn't a spirit?
But I could feel something watching me on the other side of that mirror. I could tell something was wrong with that mirror shard, Hyaktu insisted. Jabali frowned.
Well, maybe there is a spirit on the other side of that mirror. But it might not have been a spirit that dropped it in the courtyard. Maybe it was that Sarala.
Sarala? Hyaktu queried in surprise. Jabali nodded.
You said so yourself. You don't know who she might be running from or what secret she might be hiding. So what if she brought the mirror shard into the school?
But she seemed alarmed by it too, Hyaktu pointed out skeptically.
Maybe she was. Maybe it was something that she didn't realize she had on her, then she brought it to you. Or maybe she planted it on you, so some spirit can spy on you.
Hyaktu frowned and ran his fingers over his mustache strand as he contemplated this. I don't know, he mumbled. I don't think this is Sarala's doing, or that she knew anything about it.
Well, I guess you better just keep an eye on her,
Jabali said.
Now where's that food at? I'm starving.
Hyaktu straightened up. Right, this way. He took off running several paces to his left, to the eating hall door. Jabali grumbled something sarcastically behind him, but as Hyaktu pulled open the door, he could hear Jabali's loud footsteps stomping against the stone ground. Hyaktu rushed inside and darted around the empty tables, nearly smashing his hip into one corner. He soon made it to the other side of the eating hall, near the edge of the counter, laughing as Jabali caught up seconds later.
Why you always running off?
Jabali scoffed, unable to hold back a broad grin. Hyaktu winked up at him. I may run off, but I'll wait for ya. Jabali raised his eyes to the ceiling. Hyaktu signaled for Jabali to follow him behind the counter, where a door led to the kitchen. The cooks had finished cleaning up by now, and the room lay dark. There were 2 long islands in the center of the room, and multiple metal fridges lined the walls. Against another wall was a long sink, where many trays were placed on a rack to dry overnight. Pots and pans were scattered along the marble counters, and a variety of spoons hung from the ceiling. There should still be a bowl in the oven, Hyaktu said.
Which one?
Asked Jabali, scanning the row of ovens on the far wall. This one, Hyaktu said, opening the door of the oven nearest the door that led into the southwestern tower where the cooks were quartered. He pulled out the bowl and passed it over. Hope it's as good as that soup you were gonna make. Jabali took the bowl, sniffing at the food Hyaktu had selected. A chickpea curry with bits of potato, carrots, rice, and extra chili flakes.
Smells tasty. Your cooks are too good students here. That's a lot of chili flakes, though.
I know you like things hot, Hyaktu said with a shrug. Jabali stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing. Hyaktu raised one side of his unibrow, confused by the action. But before he knew it, he found himself chortling too. Eventually, both men calmed down enough for Hyaktu to grab Jabali a shell-shaped spoon from the ceiling to try the curry.
This is good,
Jabali praised.
You ought to give your cooks to me.
You run a coffee shop, Hyaktu stated bluntly.
I can open a restaurant. I've done so before,
Jabali said. I'll think about it, teased Hyaktu.
Then I'll hire you too,
Jabali said.
You still know how to cook, right?
Hyaktu snorted, reaching up for another spoon, this one more of a ladle than a spoon, passing it to Jabali and taking Jabali's spoon instead. He dipped it in the curry and tried a bit. It was on the cooler side since it'd been sitting for a moment, but the flavor was intense and hot, causing his tongue to burn and his throat to swell. Turning away, he coughed and choked over the chili flakes, Jabali laughing the entire time. When Hyaktu finally recovered, he sputtered, Yes, I know how to cook, obviously. You taught me, after all. But no, I will never cook something this hot again. Gah! He coughed again, then said, Anyhow, I can't help you with a restaurant. I have a school to run.
Do you even want to be running this place?
Jabali queried, all traces of laughter gone as he scrutinized Hyaktu closely. What do you mean?
It's just you never wanted a magic school,
Jabali said, setting the bowl of curry down on the counter beside him. Maybe not, but it's what I ended up with, Hyaktu said, shifting his weight to one leg and placing a hand on his hip.
Don't you want to travel again?
Of course I do, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. At least, not long-term traveling like I'm used to, Hyaktu said with a shrug. Traveling over the summer is enough for me, and it seems to be enough for the kids. But the school is where our lives are now.
If you say so,
Jabali murmured, grabbing the ladle and scooping more curry into his mouth.
But I don't know if this life really suits you.
Hyaktu frowned at the comment, but did not know what to say in return. He therefore walked past Jabali to the counter, grabbing a pot and pushing a button on the side to turn it on. The metal object was filled with fire magic, and it seemed to have just been re-enchanted by one of the cooks, judging by the fast pace it was heating up. Then he grabbed some almond blend from a bamboo carton in the nearby fridge, and took a sack of chocolate from the pantry in the island.
Making hot cocoa?
Jabali asked. His tone sounded like he was smirking. Yes, Hyaktu stated.
It's summer.
And?
It's hot out.
And?
It's hot in here.
You ate something hot, Hyaktu pointed out. Why can't I have a hot drink? Jabali seemed disappointed when Hyaktu turned around after adding the blend and chocolate to the pot. He returned to his bowl of curry, the smirk gone from his face. Hyaktu frowned, wondering if he had somehow offended his friend. Actually, knowing Jabali, I probably didn't understand some sort of joke he just made. Hyaktu reconsidered, rolling his eyes. He grabbed a wooden spoon from the ceiling to mix the pot's contents, breathing in the chocolatey aroma as it melted into the blend. After a minute of stirring, he grabbed some pepper from a spice pantry, adding a bit in. By the time the hot cocoa was done, Jabali set his empty bowl on the counter.
Well, that sure was tasty. Thanks for the meal, but I best be going home now,
he said. Hyaktu blinked in surprise, turning the pot off. Already? I thought you'd stay longer.
Nah, you know my visits don't last long.
Jabali said.
Too risky with your kids around. But it was nice to see ya again. We gotta meet up soon. Properly, eh?
Yes, Hyaktu agreed at once, smiling up at his friend. He poured the hot cocoa in a mug, then led the way out of the kitchen. They were soon walking through the glass doors and exiting the school. Where's your boat? Hyaktu asked, peering at the dark forest in front of them.
Oh, you know me, I took a rock to get here extra fast,
Jabali said. Then you shouldn't be going back on one after you just ate, Hyaktu exclaimed in alarm. You're gonna get sick.
I'll take it nice and slow, don't you worry,
Jabali said, pulling his mirror out of his shorts pocket.
I already got my jazz music ready for a chill ride back.
Hyaktu smiled and shook his head. Fine, fine. Just be safe out there, okay?
You know I'm safe,
Jabali retorted.
If anyone ain't safe in these parts, it's you.
Hyaktu snorted. Yeah, sure. He reached forward and hugged Jabali. Thanks for coming by and checking the enchantments. I really appreciate it.
Yep,
Jabali said, patting his back before stepping away.
see ya soon enough.
See you. Jabali soon vanished into the shadowy forest, Hyaktu waving the entire time. He eventually lowered his hand and turned back to the school, but not before something caught his attention. Snapping his gaze back to the forest, Hyaktu relaxed his body with several deep breaths. He scanned the undergrowth for several minutes, wishing that the movement would happen again. Was it just an animal? A plant? A frog oil? Or was it something more sinister? Who goes there? Hyaktu called out, his voice bold and confident. But nothing answered. Nothing stirred. The crickets continued to chirp, and the trees continued to whisper to each other. Hyaktu waited 10 minutes, 16, 22. Guess it was nothing, he uttered, opening the door at his back while keeping his gaze on the forest. He was back in the school in 2 steps, but everything remained calm outside. Locking the door, Hyaktu waited another 2 minutes before finally walking away, only looking once over his shoulder as he went down the hall. The world was quiet.